to our very first, Strictly Speaking. My name is Joshua Reaves. I am the director of University Theater, and this is Strictly Speaking, Conversations with Theater Makers. And again, this is not only our first webinar in this series, but our first webinar ever. I know we can all understand that we're all trying new things nowadays and trying it out. So, we're honestly figuring this out as we go tonight. And we hope that we want this to both be casual and exciting. So if we hit a few bumps along the way, remember they're just happy little accidents. So let's first, before we introduce our panelists, we're going to talk about a few ground rules-ish things and how to do things. So for you, for those who have never been on Zoom before, there is a Q&A button located right at the bottom of your screen, and it should allow you to ask questions. This is a Q&A type of session. We're going to spend the first half of the time speaking to the panelists, but in the second half, was really dedicated to questions from the audience. But feel free to ask a question at any point. Both myself and Jamie are monitoring the questions. So tonight we have an amazing artist with us to speak a bit about their work, their industry, and to take some questions from you. ELISHEBA ITTOOP, a sound designer and composer currently in New York City, yes?
Yeah, Upper Manhattan, here I am.
Great, so to start it off, can you tell us what is a sound designer? What does the role mean to you?
Yeah. Well, there are different kinds of sound designers, but, I think me as a sound designer, what I do is, for theater, I like to joke, but it's a real thing that if it makes noise, I've had some hand in it. I like starting from the beginning, I'm getting the script, I'm reading through the script, I have ideas, I'm touching base with the director, they have ideas about what this play world is. We're like talking about play world, about mood, about genre, all these things. And I go away and I like rethink through the script with the director's words in my head. Then, we're meeting with the rest of the design team. I'm looking at what the set designer is concocting. I'm looking at what the costume designer is building. I love listening to lighting designers talk about this world. And together we start as a group coming up with what this world looks, feels, sounds like. And then we add actors into the mix, and I'm in rehearsals whenever I can be, or if I can't be, I'm sending like QLab. I don't know, are y'all using QLab over at NC State? I'm building like QLab bundles like almost every day so they can rehearse with music, sounds in the room. And I might get a rehearsal report that's like, hey, could this song that transitions us from 1 to 2, could it be 7 seconds longer and end in a toilet flush because of this moment? And I'm like, yes. And then that night I'll build this new thing that ends in a toilet flush and upload that to Dropbox. They have it in QLab. They can try it out the next day, start of the day. So things like QLab have been amazing for my work. But, as a sound designer, I always say that if the first time they're hearing sound in the room is the first day of tech, I kind of haven't done my job. I'm with y'all in rehearsal, like physically, virtually, and then we get to the first day of technical rehearsals and we're just like putting all the pieces together and we're figuring out like physically how this world works, aurally how this world works to create this this hopefully beautiful thing. Before that, I've like spec'd out what speakers are going in the space, what microphones are going on the stage, on the actors. Maybe we have like microphone areas set up backstage for people to like, deliver that spooky monologue for unseen. And maybe like I put some reverb on it, or, I'm sending this sound through a subwoofer. Like tech is kind of like, tech is a tedious part of our job, but it is my favorite part of the job because it's like where we just get to all be in a room together and like throw some spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. Yeah, and then we get to opening night and hopefully we have this amazing thing in front of us.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what QLab is, it's a program that sound designers in particular, utilize. Actually, now lighting designers and video designers are getting into the program as well, but it really started off with sound. But I like what you say about how throw spaghetti at the wall, that the tech is the moment to bring it all together. I find that, and Jamie, maybe you could speak to this, that those types of texts in which we're actually creating the moment as opposed to doing what we have been planning for weeks, we're actually finding those things. And I really appreciate when a sound designer has the chance to like, can we add a toilet to this? And they, bam, it's awesome. Do you feel that you're a composer as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you feel how does that factor into sound design? With the idea that sound design, is it just pulling sound effects or making the microphone work? How does the composer part work for you?
Yeah, I need to, when I'm doing both of those jobs, I do need to kind of think of myself as two different people in a way. And more, I need to make sure I have an associate and or assistant with me on gigs where I am both the sound designer and the composer, because they are two different parts of my brain. As a sound designer, I do need to focus on the sound system, those microphones. I need to, I do need to program QLab. I need to make sure our console is programmed or getting programmed. As the composer, there is some logistical stuff I need to do, but I need to like take what the director's saying and translate it into music. And oftentimes that music, maybe I need to teach some singing to the actors, and maybe we have some musicians on the show and I'm teaching them like this guitar part. And that's if I was just the sound designer, I would not be doing that. If I was just the composer, like that sound system is not part of my job. So it does get very tricky, sometimes a little muddied when I am both. So I have to make sure, it's a tricky thing as I say this. I'm like, I have to make sure I'm like two different people, but I'm not. I am one person. So definitely the lines get a little blurry at times. But yeah, I love sound designing and also composing. It's very like empowering. I can sit there and be like, oh, I think this moment, I think it needs like the rustling of grass and a beautiful guitar moment. And I shall do both. So
That's great. So Elisheba, how did you get started with sound and music? Like what brought you here? I know like for me, like it was high school, right? And then you and I met on our journey through in graduate school. So I met you partway on that path, but where did you start?
So, gosh, it all kind of starts. So I'm from North Carolina originally. So I'm from Cary, and I was a really shy kid, and my mom heard about this thing called improv, and that it might help shy kids get out of their shells. And she heard of these improv classes at Raleigh Little Theater. So she signed me up for improv at RLT, which is like Justin Y'all's back door, basically. It's like, it's there, RLT. I love that place still. And I started doing like all the theater classes there. And then I started doing all the theater classes in high school. And I like knew at the time I wanted to be an actor. And I auditioned got into NYU. I was an actor. Jamie, I don't know if you know this, but like I was an actor for a while. I went to NYU and I studied acting.
I did not know this. That's amazing.
That's my secret. So, yeah, I really thought I was going to be like a musical theater actor because I was
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm also, I am still like a singer. My family, we're all singers, musicians. Voice is for all of us our strongest instrument. My brother and sister are both, singers, classical and opera. And I thought I was gonna go like the musical theater road. And then I don't know. I think I like admire actors. I think it's like the scariest, bravest thing that they do, to go up there every night and just put it all out there. Very quickly I was like, oh, I'm not an actor for many reasons, but I still think they're like some of the bravest people in this thing that we do. And then, I tell people, and this is a true thing, like the beginning of my second year at NYU, it was a total schedule fluke, but sound design was on my schedule. And I look around at all my friends and I was like, what is this thing called sound design? Is it on your schedule? And everyone was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, is sound design not on your schedule? And everyone's like, no, we have like dance at that moment, or we have acting too. And I was like, oh no, something's wrong with my schedule. And I was just like, let's see what happens. And I went to this like small little room in the back of NYU's Tisch building. And it was my first sound design class. And I wasn't supposed to be there. It was a schedule fluke. It was like a total misprint. They tried to correct it later that day, but I'd just been to the class and I was like, that was dope. So like, I'm sitting in this class, we put on headphones and we're being taught how to manipulate sound. And to manipulate sound, you know, when you do that, you can, like, I call it aid and abet storytelling. And like immediately I was hooked. I was like, oh my God, this is what I was meant to do. I am meant to tell stories with audio. And like from there, I was hooked, and I was sound designing everybody's show at NYU. Like, do you have a show? Let me sound design it. Let me sound design your show. So sound designing everything. And, you know, kind of like, blah, blah, blah. Like that led me to NCSA because pretty quickly I maxed out the sound design capacity of NYU at the time. I started looking up grad schools like pretty quickly. And I found that there's this amazing graduate program, like basically where I grew up. And it was like, this makes sense to me. I think I graduated a little early, went to NCSA. And I had a good time the first couple years. Because I'm such a content-oriented designer, they wouldn't let me do content. They made me do systems, sound systems. And then I think my final year, my third year, is when they like let me break the reins and do content. But I had a great time at NCSA.
So you say you're a musician and you work in theater, and I think I've seen you got some film work, some podcasting work, broadcasting, stuff like that.
Yeah.
What is your favorite medium to work in? I mean, these all tell stories, but where do you find that your passion lies?
My favorite things to do, let's see. I mean, before time, I was loving doing sound design composing. Like if I had gigs and I could be both the things, like that was the best. I loved it. Nowadays, I mean, even before then, I am loving podcasts very much. There's something really wonderful about, like, theater is great because like you never know what's going to happen on any given night. So when you build a cue, you need to kind of build a safety into it, knowing that this actor might take an extra breath, or there might be a stumble in the monologue tonight. And so you don't want like that thunderclap to like interrupt them. So there is like, you're building constant safeties with live theater sound design. With podcasts sound design, like you can really like fix it to the moment. And there's something kind of like wonderful about that. It's kind of nice to sit at my desk and just kind of like, I don't have a commute. I'm just kind of like making the thing. I don't know. That's such a tough question to ask because I'm also in the middle of like, I miss theater. So it's like, well, theater, obviously. But I'm really loving podcasting as well.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to play a little bit of some of your work. So everyone, you can find ELISHEBA's work on SoundCloud, and I'm going to play, this is the God You're Pretty, just to give a little sense of what it is, of what you do. I'm going to take it a little bit further to where we really pick up.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's, you know, a little bit of what you do. What can you talk a bit about that piece of music?
Sure. That was for a new play at Playwrights Horizons Theater here in New York. It was called The Pains of My Belligerence. It was a intense show. This is tricky. It's like I want to talk about it, but I don't want to give things away if people end up like reading the script or something. But it is kind of a brutal, like funny but brutal piece about toxic masculinity. And it was written by Haley Pfeiffer, and she also performed in it. And there were nights where my assistant and I would just turn to each other like, how can she be in this every night? It's so brutal. So it's funny, Jamie, that you have like the Blade Runner posters behind you, because the director was like, whatever the music is in this world, I think it's inspired by Blade Runner. I think there's something like futuristic about it. I love like that Blade Runner synth. And like, I love that he referenced it, because then I went back to watch Blade Runner. I was like, oh yeah, that's
Got a very specific sound and
yeah.
vibe to it for sure.
And I love stuff like that, because there's this Elvis Costello quote, let me see if I get this right. Talking about music is like dancing about architecture. It's just like, it's weird. Like, what is dancing about architecture? It's weird. And I think he was getting at like talking about music can be really weird. It's really subjective. And the fact that, this director Tripp was like Blade Runner synth, I was like, I know exactly what that is. And so for that show, there's not just like out there like, this is the Blade Runner synth, you may have it. I had to like listen to that synth for a while, like for a day. I had it on repeat. And I have my synth patches and stuff, and I'm like recreating the sound, and then I'm like, there it is. So it's based on the Blade Runner synth sound. And then from there, I was also like talking to Tripp and the playwright about other things that they were vibing on at the time. And it's what did we like at the time? Like Sigur Rós, that Icelandic band. I'd have to go back to my notes, but it was like this weird mix of Blade Runner, Sigur Rós, and Fleet Foxes, I remember. But yeah, without giving too much away, it was a very brutal show about toxic masculinity. Yeah.
So let's see. Moving into, you mentioned the before time, so now in the now times.
Yeah.
How have the events of the world changed your work, but in two parts? Like, how has it changed your approach to the work, and then also how has it changed how you do your work?
Yeah. So my approach to the work, well, with theater sound design, it's this thing that we always said, you go into the space, and sound design is yes about the content, but it's also about sculpting that content like in the room. The room is kind of the most important thing, the architecture of the room. And it's something that I don't have anymore. It's and I think I miss a lot of the trappings of theater. But I miss being in the room. I miss being like, oh wow, this room feels like maybe too alive or a little too dead, so let me like compensate by doing these things. Or I don't know, there are things about like, I just miss being in the room. I'm doing a lot of I am doing a lot of like podcast work, editing, also composition for podcasts, which is great. Fills the time, keeps me off the streets. But yeah, I do miss that very much. Oh, and I'm doing a couple of like audio dramas these days. And so it's different because like I'm in Zoom rehearsals, like with this one like audio play right now. And it's fascinating watching how they're doing things. But, normally that's, we're doing Malima's Tale. I don't know if y'all have read Malima's Tale. It's with this elephant in Kenya. but there are moments where like the elephant breathes, you know, he cries out in pain. And that's where I'd be in rehearsal, like, okay, and now we're gonna throw this in. And then we hear the savannah around him. And then when he screams, I'll get to do this. And I don't get to do that now. Like rehearsals are very different for me right now. Yeah. I don't know if I fully answered the question, but in the before time, I was just more hands-on, like in the moment. And now it's a lot more like post-production work.
See, you're stumbling. There was a stumble. I was like, where's my mute button? So yeah, so and I'm seeing that, you know, another Raleigh connection that you have. You were working with the News and Observer, doing some work with them.
Yeah, that was earlier in the pandemic.
Yes, and so this Masterpiece Studio work that you've been doing, we're looking at ELISHEBA's website right here, but I'm going to play a little bit of this one right here, Jacqueline, and let you guys hear this, and we can talk a little bit about it.
Sure.
I'm sure there's a lot of folks that think, and not saying that they don't care, but they're just not aware that folks are still in this process. We're going on 2 years in almost to this thing. When the storm was approaching, we actually got out the evening of the storm. And what we did, we first went to a shelter. The shelter was full. So I left here, we left that afternoon, and we went to Atkinson. And we stayed in Atkinson for 6 months after that storm because we couldn't get back here. It was, on any given weekend, we'd have 10 people in that house. I mean, we was all over the place. We was on the couches, the floor. I felt like I was putting others out. And
so that was a bit from the News and Observer's Working Narratives project that you worked on. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because I actually learned something about it before we started this this session. Yeah, talk to us about it.
That was a really fun project, and like near and dear to my heart because I mean it takes place in North Carolina, in Eastern North Carolina, and the big thing, like I was talking to you about this before this, is that, you know, I didn't write the music for that. That's so I layered in music. So that's a big part of podcasting too. Like sometimes with podcasting, I'm editing things and it might not actually be my music, that we've bought other people's music for it. The big thing for that one is I was handed like all this audio. I was handed Pro Tools sessions with the dialogue. Like, okay, Arlisha is saying this, Jacqueline is saying this. It's all dry. There's no ambience around them. We just we sat in front of them and we recorded them. But then we went outside and we spent a few hours like walking around the houses, walking through fields, standing by the highway. So we have like all of these field recordings. So could you now take all of this stuff and make it sound like we were like walking around and talking with them? And I was like, ooh, yes. And their big thing was like, don't use any sound libraries you have, only use like all of this sound stuff that we recorded. They had so much great stuff. And it was random, you know. It'd be like, I'd listen to a track and I had to like come up with my own labeling system for it, but it'd be like, okay, I'm hearing like 35 seconds of like stillness, but it's outside. Oh, and there's like a sprinkler, like a yard sprinkler. Oh, and that sounds like a dog barking in the distance. Oh, and that's a kid running. Okay. So I had like, it was a strange labeling system. And what you do hear in that track, you know, I remember just now hearing like the birds kind of start soaring a little bit. Like that wasn't there when she was talking. I can't remember which one, but like, you know, she's talking, and in a pause you hear like in the distance, like, arf, arf. And you're like, she's talking. And I just kind of created an ambience story around them. The point was not to make it overbearing. It was just to make these pieces feel a little warmer, a little more like lived in. Yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that.
In that house. I mean, we was all over the place. We was on the couches, the floor. I felt like I was putting others out, and I didn't want to do that, you know. So
Yeah, I mean, you could just it just like you were saying earlier, it's about telling stories audibly, and
Yeah.
I mean the richness of that. Just it really it tells you where Jacqueline is, or it gives me a sense of
Yeah.
where she is.
Absolutely.
Sounds
Oh,
great.
can you guys hear my baby right now?
We did, and I was afraid that you heard when I played it because my kids are running in and out of the door. I'm like, I know she didn't put a door in that, and so I hope it wasn't.
I did wonder. I had a moment of like, oh, did I put a door?
Did I mess up in that? What did I do? Yeah.
Well, it was it. I had a moment of like, that's so interesting that I did that.
It's my contribution to.
I love it. I love it.
Great. So you talked about your podcasting. How did you get into that? How does one get into podcasting?
Yeah. Well, how did I get into it? I was sound designing, and I just hit a moment where I was like, I like doing theater. I wonder, I did have a moment of like, I think maybe I'm getting a little bored, and what might it mean if I stretch what I'm doing? It was just a question I kept asking myself. I love theater, but I just I don't know. The question was kind of like, how do I diversify? How do I keep doing this for other things? What are the other things? So I remember maybe 5 or 6 years ago that question was really just like always in front of me. So I just started investigating. What does it mean to do sound for other things? Could I do other things like their sound, but also do theater sound? And it just kind of came to me one day. It was like, oh, I listen to podcasts. I bet they have sound designers and engineers on these things. And I did a little bit of research. Yeah, they employ sound designers. And then, it's like getting into theater. No one's going to hand you a job like at the Guthrie, like immediately out of school. It takes you a moment to maybe land that design at the Guthrie. So I had to kind of like knock on some doors and like convince people that, you should let me into your podcast world, and I shall make you some things. Come on, trust me. And eventually, with enough knocking, NPR StoryCorps was hiring at the time. They were hiring their first podcast producer. And I remember submitting a resume thinking, there's no way they're going to take me in. Like, this would be a dream job, but I don't have podcasting experience. But I always tell everyone, young people, anyone who's like reshifting what they want their job to be, even if you think you're not, 100% qualified, that's totally okay. Just apply to the damn thing. Cause you never know. You never know what they're actually looking for. They're always listing like what the ideal candidate is, but they may look at your resume and be like, you seem really cool. I would like to talk to you. And then maybe you're a great like interviewee. And maybe you just like charm them so much. And I don't know, I'm just always telling people like, just apply for the thing. So I took my own advice. I just applied for the thing. And it turns out that the executive producer at StoryCorps, I went to college with his wife, and he was looking at resumes like over the dinner table. And, his wife was like, oh my God, ELISHEBA ITTOOP, I went to school with her. Is she applying for this? She's really cool. You should talk to her. And he was like, oh, okay. So it was wild because I get the call like, come on in. And I'm just like, me? I'm sure it was an accident. And I come in and it was just like, I don't have podcasting experience. And Michael was like, yeah, you know what? Like Shawnee told me to check you out. I listened to your portfolio. You're awesome. And you seem really cool. I can teach you the podcasting and radio side of things. That's easy. The sound design narrative side of things it's so much harder. So if you can like, bear with me for like a couple of months where I like really teach you some things, I think we could do this. So that's kind of my medium long story of how I got into podcasts. It was like, just like forcing myself to apply to a thing that I wasn't 100% qualified for. And then a little bit of luck. It's that I happened to go to school with someone, and And this is the other thing I tell young people, like, just being nice can actually get you a lot of things. I'm not saying like be a pushover, but just like being a pleasant force in the room, it goes a long way. And the fact that Shawnee, like a decade later, remembered like, oh, ELISHEBA was like really cool, you should talk to her. Yeah, that meant so much. I should probably write her a letter to thank her. Anyways, that's how I got into podcasting.
Awesome. Yeah. I agree that, there's definitely luck and who you went to school with sometimes helps. I mean, you're here because Jamie Mellema knew you and we were like, yes.
She's cool. Let's do this.
Yeah, Alicia, you should write him a letter.
I will.
So we did have a question that was submitted earlier before this event. Can you tell us about a time when you had a strong disagreement with a director's design choice?
Yes, I can. And I'm like embarrassed to talk about it. So.
Now remember, we're recording, so if you don't
totally
want to see it, okay.
I feel like if he even saw this, he'd be like, yeah. But because it's on me, it's embarrassing for me that I did this. So I still work with this director, but was it our second show together, we were doing this piece where we had mapped out the sound design, and then we get to a transition and things aren't working, and he was like, hey, E, what if we did, and he said a thing, and I just immediately, without thinking about it, I just go, ugh. Like whatever piece of music he wanted, I was just like, ugh. And he turns to me, and I'm sure if he was here, and if he ever listens to this, he might know it's him, and I'm sure he'd be like, oh shit, sorry. But he was like, screw you. And I was like, oh my God. And he was like, I demand this piece of music be played. And I was like, okay, and I was so stubborn. I was like, I think it's a stupid piece of music. And he was like, I think you're stupid. And it like turned into a thing. And then, I mean, he got his way. Like I played the music, and then, he was like, I think it sounds great and we're keeping it forever. And I was like, fine. And then he was real grouchy at me for the rest of the day. And I turned to the set designer at some point and I was like, did I do something bad? And the set designer was much older than me and like so chill. He was like, you did. And I was like, oh no, what did I do? And he's like, you didn't say yes. Like, what would it have cost you to say yes? What would it have cost you to just like try out the song? And I was like, but I don't like the song. And he's like, it wouldn't have cost you anything. And probably he was like, knowing how a lot of like people work, a lot of directors work, he just wanted to try a thing. And maybe later today, maybe tomorrow, he might be like, I'm not feeling this piece of music. Can we try something else? But you've now created an environment where you are adversaries. What would it have cost you to just say yes? And I was like, oh no, I've done something bad. And I mean, the set designer was like, I think he will eventually get over this. And eventually he totally did. But I'm still like, even telling you the story, like I'm just like getting a little hot in the face telling it, because like, that was so stupid of me. I shouldn't have done that. And I do see a lot of like, especially younger sound designers doing that. They're just like, ew, your choice sucks. And it's just like, oh no, don't do that. Just try it. I do work with that director still. And whenever he's like, let's try this thing, sometimes even to this day with him, I'm just like, what? You know what? Let's try it. And a lot of times he's actually right. It's pretty cool what his decision was. And then plenty of times I'm like, I was right, but it's nice to let him come to that decision.
Yeah, I that's one of the things I find I like so much about the art that we do is it's collaborative to a point where it's give and take. And I think you nailed it when you the scene designer said, what would it have cost? And if it's something pure to you, like you fight for it. But if it's not, let's just try it out. Let's throw spaghetti on the wall, as you said.
Yeah, I feel like, Jamie, I don't know if you remember, like John Toya had this saying, like, I think it's a saying everywhere, but like, is this like is this the hill you want to die on?
Mhm.
Like John Toya would say that a lot, but I know lots of people say that. But I remember John Toya especially like, is this the hill I want to die on?
Right.
I think about that a lot in tech because things will happen, moments will happen, and they're not all hills to die on. I don't need to take a stand on everything. I think there are more moments where I just need to be like, interesting. You know what? Let's try it.
Cool. So, everybody, we kind of at the halfway point, and because there's only 16 of us in this entire call, I'm throwing a poll out there right now. If we have some Q&A, we can ask, but there's so few of us. If you're interested in just joining us, for the conversation itself, please just go ahead and check yes. If not, send your questions to the Q&A. It's up to you. So ELISHEBA, I did see that, you mentioned the Guthrie, you've been to Raleigh, you've been to Winston-Salem, but you've done Dallas, DC, Vegas, tons of places. Is there a favorite city or favorite theater or favorite place that you've worked at?
Favorite. I don't know if I have a favorite. I have ones where I book the gig and it's, immediately like the resident sound designer, the crew, it's been announced, this is the design team for this show. And those people are messaging me like, oh my God, you're coming back. And I'm like, yeah, dude, those are my favorites. The ones where I'm like, I'm coming back home in a way, those feel like really nice because as a freelancer, I don't have a home base. So it's nice that I have like a few theaters where it kind of feels like coming home. Baltimore's Everyman Theater is one that I've worked at since I was like young in the grand scheme of things. Sorry, baby is very loud right now. Baltimore's Everyman Theater is a great one to like come back home to. I love working, where I'm trying to think of other ones that I like working at. New York Theater Workshop here in the city is like really pleasant. They have like really lovely people working there. Everyone was super sweet at like ACT out in San Francisco. I love theaters that have like really good company managers, people who just like take care of you. It's a nice thing when you're out of town. Yeah.
So we did have one person that's interested in joining us. So if you would just type your name in the chat, and I'll pull you in. But we do have a question to you. How useful is background in music to sound designers? How useful is a background in music to a sound designer?
I think it's super useful, but I don't think it's 100% necessary. I have friends, colleagues who did not study music. They didn't study a musical instrument, but they're amazing sound designers. With that said, a lot of sound designers did, back in the day, a lot of them played bass guitar. A lot of sound designers are bass guitarists. My friend Jason, I think he played like trumpet or trombone. He played some kind of horn in the marching band that he talks about. But it's not 100% necessary. It's good if you're rhythmic. I will say that.
So what software do you recommend for baby designers who don't know what they're doing? This comes from Griffin James, one of our current, just recently graduated student and getting into sound design.
I always tell younger folks, like, I don't think you need to pay an arm and a leg for sound gear, sound software when you're like, especially like when you're right out of school or in school and out of school and you like don't have money, you're broke. That's cool. Don't invest thousands and thousands of dollars in stuff just yet. I tell people like maybe every sound design gig you get, maybe take a little bit of that money and put it into a little bank account for yourself and accrue some money, accrue some interest. So then you could like buy yourself Logic 10, or you can buy that cool MIDI keyboard. But in the meantime, you don't need all those things. I think Audacity might be free. I know it's for Mac. I think it's also for PC. That's the big one that I know about and I recommend to people. I'm sure there's ones that if others want to jump in and be like, oh my God, I use this free software. But I would just type in like free sound editing software and see what's what. If you were interested in, Pro Tools is the industry standard in theater sound design and podcast design. I pay monthly for my Pro Tools license. My license costs $25 a month, which I think is like it's pretty affordable. But I think that you can also register as a student with Pro Tools and they'll get it down to, don't quote me, but I think that you can get it down to like maybe $15 a month with your student ID. I'm very big about like Logic. I think the same thing, you can get a student discount on it. So yeah, so everyone knows like my main software is Pro Tools for dialogue editing, Logic for music synthesis. So, but yeah, don't spend a lot just yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think we pretty much, I think Kevin Wright is on the call. He's our resident sound engineer and designer, and and Kevin, I'm just going to speak for you, but I mean, Audacity goes a long way. Yeah. So what sort of language do you use to describe sound with collaborators who don't speak audio?
Funny thing, my thesis was on exactly this. It was literally on like the vocabulary of director-designer collaboration, and specifically about like directors who don't know how to, there's a baby. Sorry. It was about the vocabulary of director-designer collaboration, and specifically about directors who don't speak audio. So what language do I use? How do I speak to? I'm always telling younger sound designers, be very careful about getting too much into like the gear side of the conversation, like talking about like decibels and talking about the equipment too much, I feel can kind of just put up a wall between you and the director. I'm big about like talking in the world of visual. It's tricky though, because, with scenery, like one person's blue could be any number of blue. And
yeah, I mean, in those kinds of cases, sort of like you were talking about earlier, like referencing other things that they might be familiar with can be helpful. You talked about Blade Runner, right? Like that's a good example where
that was a great one.
You guys don't have the exact language, but you've got this thing that you can reference and communicate about. And that's true with like blue too, right? You can talk about,
and I think the big thing is like, I don't know if y'all feel this way, but like when I'm talking to a director, I don't want to talk about sound right out the gate. I want to talk about like every other thing. I want to talk about the play world. I want to talk about the fact that this director personally is like really big into baseball. Like that's actually really fascinating to me. And that actually colors how we interact. And I want to hear about like trips they've gone on. And I also want to hear about like, it's like, yes, this show, but I want to hear about all the things. Cause that helps like color our conversations. And also I feel like if we start talking about like the sound of the show, like that dog bark that must happen on page 2, stage left. If we do our first meeting starting to talk about that, I don't know. History has taught me those are my less favorite collaborations.
There's moments of,
yeah.
We got another question here. What drives the decision to compose music for a piece rather than using existing music? And then also, how do you handle licensing for your compositions?
So composing, we make that decision really early on before contracts go into place, because it involves a contractual thing. I get put onto 2 contracts. My sound design contract, which is covered by my union as well, USA 829. And then I get put also onto a composer's contract. And it's very important to everybody watching. I believe it's very important to be on a contract. Even if you're working with your buddy, your best friend, get a contract that states like, I am this job and I'm going to do these things and I'm going to start work on this date and I'm going to get my final payment on this date, a breakdown of the payments. I'm sidetracking a little bit here, but I anybody who's watching, get a contract. It's very important. But going back to composition, like we talk about that pretty early on. How does that happen? I'm trying to think about like processes where that's come up. Gosh, a lot of times it's the director being like, hey, I got this show and I want you to be my sound designer. Also, you have to write the music for it. It's something in the director's head already where they're just like, well, you have to do this. And it's just like, oh yeah. There have definitely been a couple of shows. Okay, I did this show, Native Gardens, last season, 2 seasons ago, where I was hired as a sound designer. We came into design meetings, like a design conference in Syracuse. The contract was already underway. I was just about to sign it. We're doing the design conference. We're talking about like, and then the music in the show, like, it should be like this, it should be like this. And the director was like, yeah, I don't know what you're like doing, but I love it. And I was like, yeah. And I'm like, it's basically me starting to like sing it out. And she was like, what? This is so cool. And I think on a lunch break, it just came up like, and I write music as well. And she was like, I had no idea. You should write the music. And so we had to then go back and renegotiate contracts. But mostly it happens before a design conference.
And the other part of that question was, how do you deal with the licensing your own compositions?
I don't. I'm not doing that right now. I do some of that within podcasting world. And it's just, they're very like specific contracts about how this podcast, this organization can use my music. And there's specific language about the music because I'm basically selling it to them. I cannot use that music anymore for my, like, I can't sell that music now to another podcast. So I don't have overly specific language about that within my theater contracts, but I do have specific language about it within podcasts, composition contracts.
And I personally have a question, and I don't want to go too far down this road, but with podcasts being such a really recent type of art form, is that covered by USA? Is that covered by your, is it whoever represents you for music?
Right. The USA at the moment does not cover podcasts. That might be shifting soon because so many audio dramas are happening. Within radio podcasting world, there are a couple of unions that represent like audio engineers, people that are working like specifically like, over at the New York Times or Gimlet or Spotify. There is a guild that's covering a lot of the work. I'm not in the guild. I'm not in any of those unions. So as of right now, anytime I take on podcasting work, I am not union covered right now, which is interesting.
Well, it's a new world. And hell, I mean, to be honest, sound only really came into the USA, United Singer Artists, relatively recently.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool. I've got another question here. This is a little bit specific. What was the name of the Atkinson play? Griffin is actually from the area and would love to learn the name.
The name of the Atkinson play, which one?
Is that right, Griffin? Is that, I got Atkinson play. Griffin, you want to throw another question up there real fast, maybe?
I'm trying to think. It's like, wait, what is the Atkinson play?
So while Griffin's retyping that, so the other question that I have from that's been asked, and this would be our final question, would have been my final question for you is, what can you tell young designers? What kind of what's the best advice you got when you were a student designer when you were just starting out?
The best advice I got. I'm going to tell you the best and the worst advice because I like the worst advice. The best advice is make sure you have like a digital and online portfolio, but make sure it's one that you can update regularly because people are actually checking it out. Production managers, producers, directors, they are actually checking this out. And if you have an out of date portfolio, it's just kind of just, so that does mean that like back in the day, I had a website that like I made these complicated like videos with my audio layered over it. And I remember it was like Jason Romney who was like, Jamie, I don't know if you remember Jason Romney, but he was like, you're not going to update this down the road when you are like a full-fledged sound designer. And I was like, screw you, man. You don't know my life. And he was right. Like I didn't update it for years.
I took the web portfolio design class with him.
Yeah. And I just remember like giving him so much grief, but he was right.
Yes, totally right. If you can't do it easily and quickly, then it's not useful to you.
And this is like a redesign of my website that I did like beginning of the pandemic. So, and it's like still like it's an ongoing project, but I wanted to make sure that I had retooled it so it wasn't just theater work, that it was other things. Because right now we're in such a precarious position with theater. Like when are we going to go back? That I wanted people to be aware that I can do other things. Like I can do audio for all forms of things. So at some point I don't think I have on like, I've done some sound installations and I want to be able to like put that on there. So very much a work in progress.
Cool. Griffin was talking about Atkinson, North Carolina. It was...
Atkinson, North Carolina.
Okay. Sorry, Griffin. He says used sound recorded from southeastern North Carolina. Felt very rural. Used dialogue in the sound composition. So I'm sorry, Griffin.
I think that's talking about the N and O thing.
Yeah, that sounds like the News and Observer stuff. Gotcha.
So yeah, so it wasn't. Yeah, it's not a play. And if that's the case, Jacqueline. Maybe you're thinking Jacqueline.
Yeah. That's a news organization based out of Wilmington that did that, Working Narratives. They're based in Wilmington and they did recordings. I'm forgetting what towns in Eastern North Carolina. I think they say in there, but it's all that they were in Eastern North Carolina, and it's like about the effects of like, yes, COVID-19, but also, you know, Eastern North Carolina is still recovering from like hurricanes. And also it's about kind of like the intersection of that with race. Like Black people in Eastern North Carolina are like disproportionately affected by COVID-19, you know, still like recovering from hurricanes, like FEMA not actually jumping in and like helping them get their houses fixed back up. And so why I loved working on that was because it's like kind of all the things I love working on. I love helping telling stories about and for like voices that are historically kind of not listened to or squashed quite a bit. I love helping those stories move along.
Ooh, and so was that the recordings that they provided you? Do you know if that came from Wilmington as well, or?
They came from like around Wilmington. It wasn't Wilmington. It was I'm starting to forget some of the names of the towns in Eastern North Carolina, because I remember hearing the town and being like, oh my God, yeah, I totally like drove by there. So it's like probably along I-40.
Yeah.
I used to drive down to Wilmington like all the time.
Yeah.
So, but they were small towns in Eastern North Carolina. Yeah.
Well, you know, Griffin, I would say, and I hope that the others on the call would, I did sit through and listen to Arlisha Jacqueline on ELISHEBA's website, and I'm dropping that now in the chat. They are interested. It's interesting just to hear it, not just for its sound, sound items, but the story itself that they're telling is really great. So
yeah.
Maybe Griffin will write a play based upon those things.
Yeah.
He did write a play for our creative artists. So hey. All right. Anywho, so we're about 5 minutes out. If there are any more questions for ELISHEBA, I would ask that you would throw that in the Q&A real fast. And if not, hey, I think we had a great time. Yeah. Seemed to work out.
So.
Jamie?
I think so.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay.
It was really great to see you again.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think we've worked together since Children's Theater of Charlotte, probably.
Yeah, the last one we did was did you do the one with the tree, the apple?
Yeah.
Reviving that. The Apple one, yeah. That one
Yeah.
was so beautiful.
Thank
My
you.
God, yeah.
It was a fun show to do.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun on that one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I don't see any more. Oh, wait, we got one more. Here we go. Where are you? Where'd you go? Oh no. Hey, what would you say if a director wanted a sound cue 1 millisecond sooner?
What would I say to that?
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah, cool. and maybe I'd shift a little. This is being recorded, so I guess I'll reveal a secret. Sometimes if you just say yes, that goes a long way.
And I'm a lighting designer by trade. I can't tell you how many times I've oh sure, clear, 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 clear,
For
clear,
sure.
clear, clear, clear,
Yes.
clear. Yeah, there you go. I typed it in. What do you think? But hey, everybody on the call, if you're a director I've worked with, please I've never, it was never for you. I always did.
Yeah, never for you. The other directors.
Exactly. The directors. Awesome.
Chat.
What's that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say we have one question in the chat from Kenny. What was what was the name of that heavy play you were talking about?
It's called The Pains of My Belligerence.
The Pains of My Belligerence.
Yeah, it's such a heavy title.
Right, for real.
And I'm remembering now it's about toxic masculinity and
Right.
Lyme disease.
Winning
Great combo. Yes.
And I say that, and you start to see the parallels in there, and you're just like, oh.
Oh yeah.
Well, cool. Let's see here. So if sounds like we're at time, and I am. Oh man, where's that screen? I'm looking all over for it. So Jamie, you have any last questions while I look for the screen?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Other than what do you have coming up? Like, I know that a lot of
Sure.
stuff is not happening anymore. Do you have anything that is happening?
Yeah. I have so what I'm working on. Oh, I didn't get to tell you my typical day.
Oh yes.
I wrote my typical day for you.
Yes. Like, what is your day like these days?
Well, a lot of it involves the baby.
Yep.
But yeah, and I think this will answer like what's coming up for me.
Great.
So it's a typical day. I just did like starting at midnight because I'm up all the time right now. 12:15 a.m. The baby's going through her 4-month sleep regression, so she's up and needs to nurse. 3:15 a.m. Baby's up again. 6:45 a.m. Baby and whole family is up. We're getting her ready for the day. 8:45 a.m. Baby goes to daycare, breakfast and emails. 9:30 a.m. So I like to do every morning. I like to start with like yes emails, but I'm doing a little bit more like advocacy work at the beginning of my day, and that looks like lots of things. It might involve like social justice things, politics, but there's like a round of there's like a thing I'm going for that day. So like 9:30 a.m. I'm doing my round of advocacy emails, and I'm like responding to some messages on Slack. 11 a.m. I'm listening through music samples that a podcast sent over. This is a podcast that I'm writing all of their music for, and they hired me the other day, and it's a rush job. In 10 days time, I need to have the theme music plus all of the transition music plus they're called stings, like little bits of music to kind of punctuate something. So I need to have like a lot of music generated within 10 days. So this morning I listened through the samples they sent over. I created like a word cloud for myself so that I could start like writing the music. 12:45 p.m. I'm writing the music for the podcast. I'm recording myself doing hand claps in our bedroom. 1:45 p.m. send the draft to the podcast. I'm responding to emails. Then there's lunch. And then I'm editing a kid's podcast at 2:45 p.m. So that's the thing that's coming up. I'm working for a children's audiobook company, and I'm putting together a podcast for preschoolers. It's right now it's like a 14-minute hilarious thing. It's so silly. And we went into an acting like voiceover session a few weeks ago. I directed it. And then I have all this, like I'm stitching together dialogue. I'm going back today and starting to layer in like so much sound design. And I'd like to turn that in by tomorrow, so they have that going into the weekend. and then I go back to the music, and then I picked up the baby, and then I was with you guys. That's a typical day. So to further answer, Jamie, yeah, I'm doing a lot of like podcast music generation right now, the children's podcast. I'm doing an audio play for Profile Theater in Portland. We're doing Malima's Tale by Lynn Nottage. And there's something else that I'm forgetting.
Well, that's okay because we're out of time. So
Great.
we're gonna kind of, where is it? I was gonna throw something up. It was gonna be great, but apparently it's not gonna be great. There we go. So yeah, everybody, thank you so much for coming out to hear us tonight. Next week we got this going on all through the week. And Elisheba, thank you, and we hope to hear from you again.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
All right, bye guys.
Thank you.